The city skyline shimmered under the soft glow of neon lights as Emily Carter sat alone at the bar of an upscale restaurant. A glass of wine rested in her hand, her fingers idly tracing the rim as she stared at her reflection in the dark liquid. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration. Freedom, a fresh start, a chance to finally leave the past behind. She had walked away from a toxic relationship, from a man who had never truly seen her. Freedom was supposed to taste sweet, but tonight it felt hollow. The noise of laughter around her only magnified the silence in her own heart. The wine was meant to soothe her, yet all it did was remind her how empty she felt inside. Across the room, Alexander Hayes, a powerful and enigmatic businessman, observed her with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. He was known for his ruthless efficiency, his icy demeanor, and the way he never let anyone get too close. But tonight, something was different. Tonight, fate had decided their paths would cross, changing everything. Emily took a slow sip of her wine, letting the rich taste linger on her tongue. She didn't belong here, in this world of power and wealth, where conversations were calculated and every glance carried meaning. But tonight, she wanted to escape, even if just for a moment. Her gaze drifted across the room, landing on Alexander Hayes. He sat in the shadows, clad in a perfectly tailored suit, his fingers wrapped around a glass of whiskey, but he wasn't drinking. His sharp gray eyes were locked on her, unwavering. She knew who he was, not personally but through articles. Whispers of a ruthless businessman, a man who never revealed his emotions, someone who didn't make room for weakness or attachment. And yet, right now, he was looking at her as if he saw something no one else did. Emily tore her gaze away, refocusing on her drink. But then she heard footsteps. A moment later, Alexander stood beside her. Drinking alone? His voice was deep, velvety, smooth like aged whiskey, yet edged with something sharper, something dangerous. She ran her finger along the rim of her glass, finally tilting her head toward him. What does it look like? Her voice was steady, but her pulse betrayed her. He arched a brow, setting his whiskey down. It looks like you're trying to forget something. Emily exhaled slowly. Maybe I am. A long pause stretched between them, silent yet charged. Then Alexander spoke again, softer this time. So am I. Neither knew who moved first, who crossed the invisible line between them. They left the bar together, stepping into the elevator. The silence between them was thick with anticipation, heavy with something unspoken. When the doors opened to his penthouse, Alexander turned to her, almost hesitating, as if giving her a chance to walk away. But Emily didn't leave. They collided, lost in the heat of the moment, in the loneliness that neither of them wanted to acknowledge. That night, nothing else mattered. No past, no future, just raw, unfiltered desire. But in the morning, only one thing remained: distance. Emily stood frozen in the bathroom, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Her hands trembled violently, almost dropping the plastic stick as she forced herself to look again. 2 pink lines. Her entire world tilted on its axis. This couldn't be real. Her head spun, her heart pounded wildly against her ribs. No, this wasn't happening. Desperate for reassurance, she grabbed another test, then another, and another. Each one confirmed the same earth-shattering truth. Emily Carter was pregnant with Alexander Hayes' child. A strangled breath escaped her lips, tears burning at the corners of her eyes. She had spent weeks trying to forget that night, convincing herself it had meant nothing. He had made it clear it was just a mistake. And now that mistake was growing inside her. She pressed a trembling hand to her stomach, the weight of reality crashing over her. Fear, confusion, uncertainty, all clawing at her at once. She couldn't tell Alexander. He wasn't the type of man who wanted a family. He planned every move with precision, controlled every aspect of his life. A child was never part of that plan. And if he found out, what would he do? Emily took a shaky breath, wiping away her tears. She had to do this, alone. She didn't need him. She couldn't need him. 6 months later. Emily never thought she would see Alexander Hayes again. She had avoided every place he might be, tried to live her life quietly, away from his world. But fate had other plans. At an extravagant charity gala where she had accompanied a friend, her gaze accidentally met a familiar pair of eyes. Alexander. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Of all the places, of all the people, why him? He stood in the midst of the elite crowd, power radiating from every inch of him, and his gaze, sharp, unrelenting, was locked onto her as if she was the only person in the room. She turned on her heel, ready to disappear. Too late. Emily, his deep, commanding voice stopped her in her tracks. Slowly, she turned to face him, keeping her expression unreadable. Don't let him see the truth. But his eyes had already drifted downward, to her stomach. The air between them thickened. Alexander's world tilted. For a moment, he simply stared, as if trying to process the words. Then his hand clenched into a fist. You weren't going to tell me? His voice was dangerously low. Emily's breath caught. I didn't think you'd care. His sharp gaze locked onto hers. You thought wrong. She took a shaky breath, forcing herself to remain steady. You don't need to worry. I can handle this on my own. But Alexander wasn't the type of man to walk away from what was his. We need to talk. His voice was cold, but there was something in his eyes she couldn't quite read. Emily knew she couldn't run anymore. Emily didn't know how, but within days of their confrontation, Alexander Hayes had rearranged everything to his will. He wasn't going to let her walk away from him again. Under his relentless insistence, she agreed to move into his penthouse. Not for love, but for the safety of their child. Living under the same roof as him was anything but easy. He controlled everything, her diet, her doctor visits, even the smallest details like where she could take a walk. But through it all, he never touched her. They were strangers, sharing the same space but never truly existing together. Then one night, a storm raged outside, the rain hammering against the windows. Emily came home late, drenched from head to toe, her body shivering from the cold. She hadn't expected anyone to wait for her, but as she stepped inside, Alexander was there, his piercing eyes filled with something she couldn't name. He didn't speak. Instead, he grabbed a thick blanket from the couch and wrapped it around her, his hands gripping the fabric as if he was afraid she might disappear. Her heart clenched. For the first time, she saw genuine concern in his eyes. But was it love? Or just duty? Just when Emily thought things might change, Alexander Hayes' past came crashing back, restrapped in the elegant form of Vanessa Laurent, his former fiancée. Vanessa entered their penthouse as if she still belonged there. Flawless hair, a sharp smile, and eyes filled with disdain as they flicked over Emily. You really think he cares about her, Alexander? Vanessa scoffed, her manicured fingers brushing against his arm like a lingering memory. You're not the kind of man who loves. Alexander's gaze snapped to Vanessa, cold and unforgiving. Enough, he said, his voice edged with warning. Vanessa let out a soft laugh. Oh, Alexander, you used to be so much more ruthless. His jaw tightened. Maybe. But I'm not that man anymore. He turned to Emily, his voice softer now. I should have said this earlier. Vanessa doesn't matter. Only you do. It felt like the air had been knocked from her lungs. Vanessa tilted her head, smirking. See? You're just his responsibility, Emily. Don't fool yourself. She should have been angry. She should have argued. She should have fought back. But standing there, watching his silence, she realized Vanessa might be right. She had believed he was changing, that maybe, just maybe, he saw her as more than just an obligation. But now, she wasn't so sure. That night, Emily sat quietly in their bedroom, staring at the unopened suitcases she had never bothered to unpack. She knew it was time to leave. Emily left before dawn. No goodbyes, no messages, just silence. She fled to a small coastal town where no one knew her name. a place far enough that Alexander Hayes wouldn't be able to find her. But Alexander Hayes wasn't a man who gave up easily. Weeks later, on a rainy evening, the door to the tiny cafe where Emily works swung open. He stood there, soaked from the downpour. His shirt clung to his frame, but it was his eyes, raw, desperate, unguarded, that made her breath hitch. You thought you could disappear without a trace. His voice was hoarse, as if he had spent days searching for her. Emily swallowed hard, forcing her voice to stay steady. I wasn't running. I was choosing the life I wanted. He stepped closer, every movement carrying an urgency she had never seen in him before. And you think I don't want that too? She shook her head, her vision blurring. You don't love me, Alexander. You just feel responsible. His hands clenched at his sides, his entire body tense as if he were battling something inside himself. I don't know how to love, he admitted, voice barely above a whisper. But when I lost you, I realized you were everything. Her heart ached. For the first time, Alexander Hayes admitted his greatest fear. But was that enough? Bringing Emily home didn't mean Alexander Hayes instantly knew how to love. He wasn't the kind of man who whispered sweet words. He didn't know how to comfort with soft reassurances. But he learned to love her in his own way, through actions, day by day. He started waking up earlier, brewing ginger tea for her every morning to ease her nausea. He studied every article about prenatal nutrition, inspected every ingredient in her meals, ensuring that she and their child were always taken care of. When she was exhausted, he didn't ask if she needed anything. He simply pulled her close, letting her rest against his chest, his heartbeat steady, a silent promise that she wasn't alone anymore. At night, when she tossed and turned, unable to find peace, he was always there. He didn't speak, didn't try to offer words of comfort, because he didn't know how. Instead, he simply reached for her hand, his fingers brushing against hers in a silent promise. I'm here. Once, she woke up to find him sitting beside her, his fingers tracing gently over her stomach, his once cold gray eyes filled with something soft, something rare. And then, he whispered, not just to their unborn child, but to her as well. I used to think I didn't know how to love, but you and our baby, you changed me. Emily said nothing, just tightened her grip around his hand. Because she knew Alexander Hayes was no longer a man bound by responsibility alone. He had truly fallen in love with her. And for the first time, love was no longer something he feared. That night, Alexander Hayes felt powerless for the first time in his life. Emily was in pain. She clutched his hand on the hospital bed, her breathing uneven, her face pale, and he could do nothing but stay by her side. He had faced million-dollar negotiations, ruthless business battles, but never had he felt fear like this. I'm here, he whispered, brushing damp hair from her forehead. I'm not going anywhere. The hours stretched endlessly, and then the first cry filled the air, and Alexander felt his heart stop. He was a father. The nurse handed him a tiny, swaddled newborn. Alexander Hayes, the cold, untouchable businessman, suddenly found his hands trembling. Mr. Hayes, here's your son, the nurse said gently. He swallowed hard, looking down at the tiny being, small, fragile, and his. He had never held a baby before. He was so stiff, so clumsy that he nearly dropped the child, causing the nurse to chuckle as she helped him adjust. But when those tiny eyes fluttered open, gazing up at him with pure innocence, something inside him shattered. He leaned in, his voice barely a whisper, hoarse with emotion. I'm here, he murmured. I don't know if I'll be good at this, but I swear, I'll protect you. And for the first time in his life, Alexander Hayes understood what unconditional love felt like. The celebration was small but warm. Candlelight flickered, laughter filled the air, and in Emily's arms was the tiny miracle she and Alexander Hayes had created together. She never thought she would have a moment like this, peaceful, whole, and deeply loved. But in the middle of the party, as glasses clinked in toasts, Alexander suddenly stood. He was never one for grand gestures, but now, Every eye was on him. "I used to think love was a weakness," he began, voice steady yet raw. "I believed that if I let someone too close, I would lose myself." He paused, his gaze finding Emily's. "But you taught me that love doesn't make me weak, it makes me stronger." A wave of emotion crashed over her. Then he knelt. Emily gasped, her heart pounding wildly. "I'm not perfect. I have so much to learn. But there's one thing I know for certain." He opened a small velvet box, revealing a diamond that sparkled under the lights. "For years, I built walls to keep people out. I thought it made me stronger. But then I lost you, and I realized I had been a fool." He took a deep breath, his voice steady but raw. "I don't just want to marry you, Emily. I want to spend my life proving to you that I was worth this second chance." The room fell silent, the only sound the whisper of the evening breeze. Tears welled in Emily's eyes, slipping down her cheeks, but she was smiling. "Yes," she breathed. Alexander rose, pulling her into his arms. His forehead rested against hers, their breaths mingling in the cool evening air. "Forever isn't just a promise, Emily," he murmured. "It's what I choose, every single day. With you." And when their lips met, it wasn't just love. It was home. Their wedding wasn't extravagant. There were no flashing cameras, no elite guest lists. Just love, pure, enduring, and forever. Under a canopy of blooming flowers, as the golden hues of sunset painted the sky, Emily Carter walked toward Alexander Hayes. He stood at the altar, dressed in a simple yet elegant suit, his eyes never leaving hers. When they exchanged vows, he gently squeezed her hands, his gaze filled with emotions too deep for words. "Emily," he said, his voice raw with sincerity. "I once believed love was something foreign to me, something I wasn't meant for. But then you came along and taught me how to love, how to be a man worthy of you. Today, I promise you, I will always be by your side, not because of duty, but because I can't imagine a life without you." Tears shimmered in her eyes. She had never been more certain of anything in her life. As their lips met beneath the twilight sky, it wasn't just a beginning, it was home. The late afternoon sun bathed the garden in a golden glow, where a small boy ran barefoot through the grass, his laughter filling the air. Emily leaned her head against Alexander's shoulder, a warm cup of tea in her hands, savoring a moment she had once thought impossible. "It's been 2 years," she whispered, watching their son chase after a butterfly. Alexander nodded, intertwining his fingers with hers. "I never thought I could have this, a family, a life that feels whole." She chuckled softly. "I never thought you'd be such a clumsy father." He let out a quiet laugh, his gaze full of warmth as he watched their son stumble, only to pick himself up again. "I'm not perfect, Emily." He turned to her, his voice deep and steady. "But for you, for him, I'll keep trying." She squeezed his hand, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her touch. "You don't have to be perfect, Alexander," she murmured, "because to me you already are." They sat there, bathed in the golden light of dusk, hand in hand, watching their little boy run freely across the garden. And as their son's laughter rang through the garden, as Alexander pulled Emily closer, pressing a lingering kiss to her temple, she realized something. Forever wasn't a destination. It wasn't a grand declaration. It was in the quiet moments, in the way Alexander's fingers brushed against hers, in the laughter of their child echoing through the garden, in the way love, once feared, had become the very air they breathed.